I think that we lack real leadership in healthcare systems. And I keep saying this is because the doctors who are the center of the healthcare system with the patient have been locked out. And now we have these guys with their shiny MBAs and their shiny MPHs that are there running healthcare systems, and they've never seen a patient. They don't understand what it's like to be a patient or a nurse or a physician.
Let me shine the light on that frail ego of the physician.
It's not
Let
an
me
ego
tell you
thing.
something. Let's talk about the AMA. Let's talk
I don't
about
even want to discuss the
physician
AMA.
lobbying groups and the
reality.
monolith that exists called clinical medicine. It's a structured hierarchy.
I'm going to interrupt you because you would never go into the educational industry and tell a teacher what to do. You've got to talk to the end user. You wouldn't go. You
do all the time. The NEA completely dominates curriculum.
Let me also make one correction. The AMA represents less than 13% of practiced and licensed physicians. The AMA is a political organization.
And their share of voice is 13%?
That has their hands in the pockets of Congress. Everybody on the AMA is making money at the expense of physicians, nurses, doctors, and hospitals in this country.
Kevin, when you go on rounds and you have pimp rounds and pecking order, there's still a tremendous hierarchy that the chief of medicine comes in and then speaks to the fellow who speaks to the medical student or the intern. There's a real hierarchy there. And I think that physicians protect that hierarchy. And I think that's got to be broken down. Why? Because the pharmacist may be the most valuable caregiver in the dynamic today, or the nurse may be. So I think that the sacrosanct physician is very tricky.
I would invite you to go on rounds with us at Duke, because when we make rounds with medical students, interns, residents, fellows, pharmacists, pharmacy residents, with social workers, physical therapists, and they are with us together.
Who only speak when they are spoken.
No, I would disagree. We have multidisciplinary rounds. When I was an intern at UVA, we had to sit in a room as an intern with all the ancillary and listen to their meetings. So
very different from a boardroom, by the way.
I think it's less different because you're on the inside. You're already there. You're part of the problem.
No, I'm able to see it from both sides. That's absolutely incorrect. And I think that's the beauty of what Kevin's saying. You've got to engage the end user. And that was a brilliant example because you have every end user at the table taking care of one patient. How often does that happen in corporate America, where all of these decisions
I can argue
are
that
being
I've
made
taken care of one customer.
Pharma, health systems, payers, policymakers. We have great policymakers that make great policy for themselves.
Yeah, but just let's not cast aside the physician as the sacrosanct job that is not in question here.
The EMR revolution that happened in healthcare. There is a reason that every doctor hates every EMR out there. They were never built with the end user in mind.
They were built with billing capture in mind.
And they were built
because,
and they were successful because of policy regulation, not because they were great pieces of technology. You buy an Apple product and you use Google because it's good. And it doesn't require any training. You know how much training I've had on Allscripts, ECW, Cerner?
We shut down our practice for 7 days, for 8 hours a day, to learn how to use some stupid billing machine.
You had to stop working for 7 days so you could figure out how to use your phone.
For 3 months. I used to see, my regular clinic is I see 45 patients in a full day's clinic. For 3 months while we were implementing Epic, I saw 7 in the morning and 7 in the evening.
And how much did that cost you?
Me personally, I have no idea.
And how much did your patients suffer?
Oh, I couldn't get anybody in. I could not get anybody in.
Sounds like a great piece of
turn
technology.
Turn around, face the other direction. Stop looking back at the spilt milk. Look forward. The promise of the EMR and technology will give you more time with your
John,
patients.
that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I think it's so important to have that perspective, and not from a doc who's drank the Kool-Aid, but actually the average doc, the one out there in middle America, in urban areas, a person who's actually in the emergency room, running an office, running a practice. Anyone who wants to disrupt or innovate, I welcome them.
So you don't think physicians are part of the problem?
I think that every stakeholder
Big part of the problem.
No different than
I'm not talking
pharma,
about other stakeholders. I'm talking about physicians.
No different than pharma, no different from any other stakeholder in the system.
Really? They're the front line of defense.
They don't even have a seat at the table.
They don't. But the issue with physicians, and I said it earlier, they're slow to adopt change, and we have to change that. You can no longer orbit in a separate orbit around the digital innovation. And I would argue that physicians in my cohort and younger are moving that direction. My senior physicians, the ones who taught me, me, I still can't get Eric Prostowski to get on Twitter. I've begged him. I've told him I would set him up, and he goes, I can't do it.
Because it's about them. Look, listen, I went to medical school, Kevin went to medical school because we wanted to see patients. We liked science, we liked people, and we said, you know, I want to take care of patients. I didn't go to medical school because I wanted to learn how to use Epic, or I wanted to get on Twitter. It wasn't about that. It's about being a doctor, and if something will help me do my job better, I'm open to it. If it's going to make me shut my office down for 7 days, only to slow me down so I can't see my patients, why should I?
I gotta tell you though, I
Why
mean, listen,
should
if you
I?
really want to get into the deep psychopathology of clinical practice today, that let's take a survey of those undergraduates who are pre-med who want to become doctors. How many of them wanted to become a doctor because they wanted to care for patients? I think that's a retrospective, feel good about yourself construct. I think it's more complicated than that, that's all.
I think if we're talking about disruption today, sorry, Colin, I think if we're talking about disruption today, the only way to disrupt in healthcare is to talk to the end user, whether it's the patient model you're trying to change, whether it's the physician, the provider side you're trying to change, you have to talk to the end user. That's all I'm saying, independent of the industry, even if we weren't talking about healthcare.
Maybe, but I'm going to say one thing, and I promise I'll be quiet. So in developing CRISPR technology, if I want to do gene therapy, or if I want to develop a new immuno-oncology off-the-shelf concept that doesn't cost $475,000, should I talk to the consumer? I don't believe that's the case. I think with respect to market access, with one leg, but every single pharma company today has the same tagline. Customers first, the life of the patient. And I think they're missing the ball. They're not keeping their eye on the nature of scientific innovation and discovery. Of course the patient is important, but the guys working on CRISPR and immuno-oncology have a different worldview, and I think that we have to respect both of them.
So I hear this talk about involving physicians and patients and all these folks, and I think it is something that innovators have to do or should do. Having spoken to a lot of these companies and working with them a lot, I think the problem though is they want to and they can't get access. It is almost impossible to get the ear of a physician to even lend them some expertise on, hey, can you just comment on what I've built? I'm thinking about this. It is virtually impossible for them to get on people's radar. I mean, you may be an exception.
And they're too busy trying to figure out their EMR.
That's right. They're busy practicing. They have no time for innovation, not because they don't want to, but because the system isn't around for it. So I find it very difficult. I work with them, and they're frustrated that they cannot get access to all of these stakeholders. I'll give you an example of a great
company doing this, Modernizing Medicine.
Sure.
They have an EMR, specialty specific. Again, I have no skin in the game, but they have actually hired ENTs, dermatologists, cardiologists, and you know what they do? If you come in for 2 days and consult with them, they will pay you whatever you make 2 days in your practice.
But here's in modern medicine, it is amazing, but look at their size that you have to be in order to do that. You're going to have to pay a physician for their time of the day.
There's no reason Epic, CERN, or
I'm not talking about those guys, I'm talking
the
the smaller ones. Because that's where where the innovations happen. It's the startups.
Modernizing Medicine
but they were
started
physicians.
Exactly.
They were physicians.
You know why? Because physician was a founder of that company. That's the point. John, I know your head is exploding right now.
No, but I'm with John on this going like, are we then forcing every healthcare innovator to be physician founded? I would say no, there should be technicians, there should be engineers.
Depends on the end user. If you're going to build a technology for a physician, yes. You have to have a physician at the table. If you're building a technology for the payer, for the patient, then you got to go talk to them. I'm not proposing.
But I think I guess the challenge I'm putting out there is if you're designing something for a physician, and I've asked and tried to get a physician at the table, and they're not coming, well, then what are you going to do? Are you going to sit on it? And I think that's the problem. I think that's the challenge for the industry.
I fully admit that. That's why the Affordable Care Act was put in place the way it was put in place is because doctors buried their head in the sand and said this will never pass. And if doctors had come to the table, and admittedly we weren't invited as much as we might have been, but we were invited, we might have had a different healthcare system in the United States right now.
We were invited after the party got started, and
well,
it was
of course
like
we were.
Almost over.
But as
the
last
10 minutes, you want to stop by?
I don't know. The Hospital Association and Pharma wrote a good deal of that bill. Yes, and if you look at the way the bill resulted, it benefited hospitals and pharma.